After you're in retirement and you want to use some of that money, every single time you take money out, you have to pay taxes. You get taxed on an income level, which is not fun, right? It actually increases your income in retirement, and then you have to pay taxes. Well, what they did is kind of put this on its head, and that is when you put money into the Roth, you pay your taxes up front, which of course doesn't sound like a lot of fun to begin with, but here's how it works. When your account, after you've paid those taxes, all the growth from then on is tax-free. That's right. So when you take the money out during retirement, you are not taxed. In today's episode, we're going to talk about how one of the wealthiest men in the world used a loophole to save billions of dollars, a loophole that you can use as well. That's coming up. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Truly Diversified. I'm your host, Ben Mohr. Today, I'm going to tell you the story of Peter Thiel. He's a multi-billionaire. He's well known as the founder of PayPal and also one of the first investors in Facebook. Currently, he's worth over $20 billion. But with one simple move using the tax code, he saved billions of dollars. And how was he able to do that? Well, if you're familiar with the Roth, which is confusing to a lot of people, he was able to use a Roth conversion to move over $5 billion so that he would not have to pay taxes anymore on that money when it grew. Now, a lot of people go, how is that possible? Because of the Roth, there's a lot of confusion. And that confusion for many people comes with the letter C. That's right. It comes down to the letter C. Most people, including maybe you listening today, think that they can't have a Roth because they're not qualified, but that is absolutely not true. So let me walk you through how the Roth works and where you can use this just like Peter Thiel did to save tons of money in your retirement. Okay, so let's start with what is a Roth. A Roth IRA was formed a few decades ago by a senator with the last name Roth, and they put this into place as a way for people to use and utilize during their retirement. As you know, with the typical IRA or retirement account, what you do is you put pre-tax money into that account and it grows. Then after you're in retirement and you want to use some of that money, every single time you take money out, you have to pay taxes. You get taxed on an income level, which is not fun, right? It actually increases your income in retirement, and then you have to pay taxes. Well, what they did is kind of put this on its head, and that is when you put money into the Roth, you pay your taxes up front, which of course doesn't sound like a lot of fun to begin with, but here's how it works. When your account, after you've paid those taxes, all the growth from then on is tax-free. That's right. So when you take the money out during retirement, you are not taxed. But there's a catch. If you are contributing, that's the first C, contributing to a Roth, there's a lot of red tape. The first thing is the maximum amount that you could put into a Roth in any given year, if you're over the age of 50, is $8,000. It's not a lot, right? I mean, imagine putting money into a Roth for 20 years. The maximum you're going to put into that thing currently right now is about $160,000. It's a nice chunk of change, but it's not something that you can bank on for your entire retirement. So that's why a lot of people don't look at the Roth from a contributing situation, because they just aren't able to put enough money in there to really make it work to sit there and go, this is my nest egg during retirement. Okay. The second thing is that if you make a certain amount of money with your adjusted gross income for taxes, you won't be able to put money in because you're ineligible. If you're a single person or head of household, currently it's about $165,000 in income. If you make over that level, you can't even contribute. Again, the first C, contribute to a Roth. If you are filing jointly, I believe it's about just a little under $250,000 as a joint income. There's a lot of people in America that is listening to this podcast and walking around saving for retirement that with a husband and a wife with a dual income household that are making more than $250,000. So therefore, they can't even put money into the Roth. And if they did, here's the problem, the maximum they could each put in is about $8,000. Now, you're wondering, well, wait a sec, with all these restrictions, I'm sure Peter Thiel makes more than $165,000 a year. So how was he able to put more than $5 billion into a Roth so he didn't have to pay taxes on that growth? This is where people get confused. Again, remember the letter C. And that is because we're talking about contributing, annual contributions to a Roth. That is not the way that he worked it, and is not the way that I have my investors work it. The other C is the word conversion. Again, conversion. Anyone in America who has a retirement account, an IRA, a 401k, can convert money to a Roth. There are no restrictions. There is no amount of money that you can put in per year or in a one-time conversion. And you don't have to, it doesn't matter what your income is. If you have zero income, if you make $5 million a year, if you're Peter Thiel worth $20 billion, you can convert to a Roth. So how does that work? What that means is that you can either do it on an annual basis, or you can just do it, randomly every couple of years, or just make one fell swoop. What that means is, let's say you had $1 million in an IRA. You could take $100,000 of that $1 million in a given year and convert it to a Roth IRA. What that means is, in that year that you convert, that $100,000 will be income on your bottom line, and you will have to pay taxes. That is the part you're not going to love. Up front, you're going to pay taxes on that money. But think about that. If you paid, say, $30,000 for a $100,000 Roth conversion, from that moment on, let's say you're 50 years old and you know you're going to work another 20 years, that $100,000, whatever you put it in, as it grows, will grow tax-free. So let's work it through. If you're not familiar, if you make about 7.2% APR per year on your investments, you will double your money in 10 years. It's known as the rule of 72. Okay, it's just basic math. At 50 and you knew you were going to retire at 70, and you did a $100,000 Roth conversion and made, say, 7.2% on your money per year, by age 60, that's $200,000. By age 70, that's $400,000. And guess what? When you start taking that money out in retirement, along with your Social Security and, let's say, your pension, that $400,000 you're touching right there is absolutely tax-free. So Peter Thiel moved $5 billion into Roth conversions, and he probably paid a few $1 billion to do it. But from now on, that $5 billion, as it grows, will come out tax-free. This is the way I recommend to people doing it. So let's go over this again. Remember, the C's: contribution versus conversion. Most of you are not going to contribute to a Roth, and even if you did, it would be peanuts. $8,000 a year is just not going to get it done. The way you attack the Roth IRA is by doing conversions. And here's what I do with my clients. We do smaller conversions. We don't do Peter Thiel conversions. We don't do $5 billion. And if you had $1 million in an IRA, you wouldn't do $1 million because your tax level is going to be way too high. If you're familiar with how the tax brackets are, there's a certain level that every time you hit a threshold, on every dollar past that threshold, you go into a higher tax bracket. So what we do is we get together with our tax team to analyze your taxes and then figure out what is the amount of money in that threshold before you go into another higher plateau in a tax bracket. It might be $20,000 worth of income. It might be $50,000 worth of income. So let's say I was sitting down with a person who had $1 million in an IRA. Again, that money will be taxed when people take it out in retirement. We do a tax analysis and find out that that person has an additional $50,000 worth of buffer in their current tax bracket before they go into a higher tax bracket. We could do then for them a conversion of $50,000 for their Roth in that year, and they're paying the same percentage on those taxes. And here's what I tell people. Okay, we cover a lot of content on here, and I'm always asked this important question: where do I start? What is a good first step? Well, if you're looking for a way to diversify your retirement away from market volatility and still get competitive returns, I want you to watch this free on-demand training. In under 30 minutes, I will walk you through the exact strategy that smart and wealthy investors like Warren Buffett have used for decades, and they do it by investing in what's called life settlements. We'll break down how this works, real case studies, and how you can add this market-independent asset class to your portfolio without having to lock it up for 10 to 15 years in some low-performing annuity. You will learn how to build stable, predictable growth and, yes, get true diversification, especially in today's uncertain environment. All you have to do is go to lifeassetllc.com/webinar. Again, that is lifeassetllc.com/webinar, or you can click on the link below here and watch it now. It is completely free, and I think you'll find it will be a game changer on how you think about investing for your retirement. Okay, now let's get back to the show. When you pay those taxes, that money was never yours in the first place. Does that make sense? Let me explain to you. If I sit down with somebody with $1 million in their IRA and they go, I'm a millionaire, I've got $1 million in my IRA, I always say, yeah, on paper, but you know that the government's going to take at least a third of that depending on where you live. If you have federal income tax and state income tax, say like in California where I live, and you're in a decent tax bracket, you're at least paying a third of that money to the IRS and the state. So if I'm sitting in front of somebody with $1 million in an IRA, I look at them and go, realistically, you've got about $600,000 to $700,000 if you attack that money right and spend it wisely in retirement. A third of that is the government's, okay? This is why people go into the Roth, because if you do it correctly and you've got $1 million in a Roth IRA at the same time, that money is all yours. You've already paid them up front. So yes, pay them up front. It hurts a little bit in the beginning, but you see all the growth, and that's how it benefits you. That's why you want to look at doing conversions. So again, if I had somebody and I showed them that in their current tax bracket, they have a buffer of, say, $50,000, there is no excuse for them to not do that conversion and pay the taxes on that $50,000 today and make sure that money goes on every year tax-free. Now imagine on that $1 million, if over 10 years, we did that for them every single year for 10 years. 50% of that $1 million would now be in a position where it is tax-free and all of theirs. That's how you want to live when you get into retirement, which is tax poor, cash rich. Because if you pull from that Roth IRA in retirement, you're not paying taxes on that money, which then lowers your income bracket in retirement. As opposed to the other way, which is what the government wants. They want you to do very, very well with your IRAs and retirement accounts, because when it comes to pay the piper to them in retirement, it's keeping you in a higher tax bracket. Just imagine, between your Social Security and if you have a pension, and if your spouse has Social Security and a pension, you're already getting into a high tax bracket, and then you start taking money out of an IRA, a lot of that money is going to go to the government, the federal government, the state, depending on where you live. But if you take a portion of this money and rely on the Roth, you can now take a lot of the Roth money in retirement and your taxes will be lower. Again, cash rich, tax poor. That is the way you want to do it. Make sense? It's what Peter Thiel has done. And he's worth over $20 billion. And a pretty smart guy, right? He founded PayPal, was literally the first outside investor coming into Facebook. This guy knows something about finance. He's a person we should be looking at to follow his lead. However, there's a warning here with the Roth, and this is how I'm going to wrap this up in the next couple minutes, and how it comes back to being truly diversified. Number one, having a Roth helps with diversification, okay, for you, because you're spreading out your money into a different account and it's going to work on a different tax basis. Here's the problem with Roth. If you go ahead and you do the Roth conversion and you pay taxes on that money, you know that if you had $100,000, yes, it's going to be taxed, but you go now and say, I have $70,000 going forward that I'm putting into a Roth because I paid the taxes. You better make sure that whatever you're investing in is something that has a very, very high likelihood of paying out the way it should. And this is the problem. If you go ahead and make a Roth conversion, off the top, you're already losing 20 to 30% of its value because you had to pay the taxes. And that's fine because you're going to let it grow. But the issue here is if you take a hit over the next 5 years and put it in something that has some risk, some decent risk, you could lose value. And now it looks like the worst decision you've ever made. Let me walk you through this real quick. If you did a Roth conversion of $100,000, you know that realistically you're going forward with about $70,000 because you paid the taxes. If you lost, say, 20% of that value by, let's say, being in speculative parts of the stock market, and let's say the market dropped over that time by 10, 20%, you're now down to almost $50,000, meaning that you lost half of the value. It's going to be a hole that is very hard to crawl out of. This is why what we do with our client base is most of them come to us with their IRAs. Where is that money to begin with? If they've got $1 million in IRA, most of that money is already in the market, okay? So they're already taking that stock market risk there. Many years it works out, and then we see the cycles where it drops off. What we do is we recommend doing small conversions, 25s and 50s, depending again on their tax bracket, but taking that money and putting it in alternative investments, life settlements. Again, life settlements of which we've talked about on here, because what are you buying? You're buying a portion of a person's life insurance policy. We know that it's going to pay out. We just don't know when. So the issue is you want to invest in something much like life settlements where there isn't the variance in the ups and downs of the market consistently. You put it over here. It will pay out when somebody passes away in a life settlement. If you want more information about life settlements, you can go back to some of our previous episodes. You can also go to our website to learn more at lifeassetllc.com. Again, that's lifeassetllc.com to learn more. But once again, this is how it operates. You want to make sure that when you take it and you pay the taxes on the Roth, that then you put it in something that you know you can foresee how it's going to pay out in the future. And this is why it's important to do Roth conversions and then put it in something that most likely won't lose massive amounts of value, like when the market takes a dump in those years that it does. So we recommend Roth conversions. Be like Peter Thiel. He did 5 billion. You can do 50,000. You can do 25,000. Be like him. And when you come out of all this in retirement 10, 20 years from now, or even if you're 5 years or even you're getting retired now, it's still doable. Have some money tax-free and make sure that it's in a place where you believe that it's going to pay off with decent returns, no stock market risk. And that's exactly what we offer at Life Asset. Again, lifeassetllc.com. If you go on there, we have the webinars, we have brochures where you can learn about this. But one of the key areas that we love to use as an investment tool for life settlements, again, is by using Roth conversions. It's the perfect blend. You get the tax savings at the end of the day, and you know that you're in something that has no stock market risk, that is not affected by the economy or outside forces like foreign wars or anything we're seeing now, like in the Gaza Strip or Ukraine, all of those kinds of messes. You are investing in something that has no effect on those whatsoever. And when you get paid out in a Roth, you're going to have that money absolutely tax-free, which will lead you to have a retirement that has lower taxes. It's the perfect blend. So that is our story of Peter Thiel, how a multi-billionaire, one of the richest men in the world, was able to find a loophole in the tax system to move $5 billion into something that now is tax-free. And it's something you can do today as well. But remember, when you do a Roth conversion, you got to make sure you know what you're investing in. So that is the lesson of today. I thank you so much for listening. This has been Mohr with Truly Diversified, and we'll see you next time.